Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge, brought to you by the Hockey Writers, where the team that covers everyone's favorite Toronto Maple Leafs, favorite to love or favorite to hate, we all get together and we chat about this team and everything going on in Leaf Nation. We are joined this week by the hosts of Sticks in the Six. That is Andrew Forbes and Peter Baracchini, as well as the old Prof, Jim Parsons Sr. Let's jump right in. It was a really bumpy March, a couple 3-game losing streaks, but it seems they came into March really strong and they're leaving March really strong. Have regained that top spot with a little bit of cushion in the North Division. Now it's up against Calgary next. Let's start up with you, Mr. Andrew Forbes. What are you thinking of this team right now? Has it got back into where it was a few weeks ago before that rough March? And what are you seeing for the Calgary game?
I don't think they're right back to where they were. I mean, obviously, ideally, you'd want to have your starter in net, and I mean, obviously, we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode. But I think that's a huge hurdle for them right now, is just making sure they've got consistency in net. I think their power play needs to start clicking. 0 for 26 now in the last how many games? So, I mean, obviously, this team's got so much firepower, and for them to be 0 for 26 in the last 26 opportunities on the power play, you're starting to question what's going on, and are they overthinking it or what have you. But the nice part is that for the first time, and I just wrote about this, for the first time in probably the entire time that Frederik Andersen has been there, backup goaltending is not the issue. And Jack Campbell 8-0 so far to start the year. One off Felix Poffin's record for franchise history to start a season. He's really setting the tone for this team and giving them the opportunity to win. So I think if they win two out of every 3 going forward here, you don't have to worry about them losing that top spot. That said, Calgary's going to be a tough opponent. I know they're sitting outside right now looking in, but this is a team that has played Toronto hard. Lucic, Tkachuk, Markstrom and net just seem to have the numbers when it comes to playing Toronto. And Gaudreau got a little kick in the butt from Daryl Sutter recently. So I think all that combined, it's going to be a good little series. In saying that, Jack Campbell has some pretty decent numbers against the Calgary Flames over his career. 4-2 in 7 games with a .951 save percentage and 162 goals against with 2 shutouts. So, if Campbell's the guy that's going, I'd be rooting for Toronto. I'd be putting money on Toronto right now.
So Forbes just said all those stats in his head, not even looking at notes. That's what he's got in his head going into this Calgary game. What have you got in your head for this one, Mr. Baracchini, when it comes to this Calgary series? This is a back-to-back Sunday, Monday. So if any Flames get out of line, as we've seen near the end of games, then Toronto will be right back there the following night to see if they can answer. So there's a real chance, as Forbes was alluding to, that the Lucic's, the Tkachuks of the world could try to get under the skin of the Leafs here with back-to-back games Sunday and Monday night.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you really got to pay attention to, because like you said, they are the agitators. They're the ones that get under your skin. They're the players that you hate playing against them, but you love to have on your team. And Toronto has tough guys on their team. They got Bogosian, they got Simmons, they even got, I'm going to throw Travis Durbin in there, taking lessons from Bogosian during that little practice. But at the same time, Toronto doesn't really go looking for trouble. So if something does happen, yeah, they need to answer the call and step up, but don't cross the line too much. You don't want to hurt the team. You don't want to give the opposition a chance to try and hurt you on the power play again. And they've been pretty good in that regards for, since the core started coming together with the young players. They know how to step back, but they need to know when enough is enough. And I think we've seen quite a bit this year that if something happens that they don't like the Jack Campbell incidents, Frederik Andersen getting bumped by Brady Tkachuk against Ottawa, they're going to step in. And we've seen Justin Hall do that too as well. So They're not a physical team. They're not, one to go looking for trouble. But if you irk them the wrong way, yeah, you're going to have to answer to them. But they do a good job with their composure and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about fiery and getting under the skin and everything else, that goes completely against the old Prof, because he likes the polite, nice gentleman hockey out there, and everybody's friendly. And that came to my mind because I've been seeing a lot of these old videos of Austin Matthews and Matthew Tkachuk are buddies, and they really hung out a lot in the younger years in the U.S. program. I saw a few pictures of him with Matthew and Brady, and hanging out on the dad's boat and all these different things. And they're going to be teammates, in the next Olympics as well. So, old Prof, what I'm trying to say is there is some friendliness going on between these teams, but it really does have a chance to boil over because the Flames, they're not out of it just yet. What are you seeing?
The Flames are an interesting team. And the advantage I think that the Maple Leafs have is something that Sheldon Keefe noted in an interview just a couple of days ago. And he alluded to and hinted at the fact that the team chemistry was really good. And that is, I think what he means by that is that he has now on his team a great number of players who are taking leadership roles themselves. Now, I think that's a huge advantage for a team moving forward. What I see in Calgary is something quite different. I think Sutter was brought in because it needed leadership. What we have in Calgary, I think, is big leadership that starts at the top. What we don't have is leadership at the grassroots level. And I think that's the biggest deal that is different from these two teams. I don't think that anyone will emerge this year with Calgary to take that leadership on. And in fact, I'm not one for dissing players, but I'm not a Matthew Tkachuk fan because I think it's more about him than it is about other things. He just seems to have a sense that he's the center of the universe, and I don't think that plays well. And I think it hasn't sorted itself out with Calgary. So in the long term, I don't see Calgary being a team that's going to threaten because I think they have a leadership crisis. I do not think the Maple Leafs have a leadership crisis. I think Keefe has backed off a little bit and allowed the big players. And honestly, you see Spezza stepping up all the time, not just on the ice, but also as a spokesperson. And so I really like that aspect of the Maple Leafs team. And I think it bodes well for the future. That Tkachuk thing hasn't gone away. I'm thinking that there may still be some stuff happening between the Maple Leafs and the Flames. So I'm anxious to see what's going to happen. I can't predict what will happen. I think Campbell in goal is Hutchison will play one of the games, whether it's the first game or the second game, I don't know. But it'll be a very interesting series, and I think I'm obviously hoping for the Maple Leafs to do well.
Let's go a little bit more on Tkachuk because this is the first time that Jake Muzzin will be seeing Tkachuk without the bubble on his face, because it was right after that game that he broke the bone in his face. So Tkachuk never went after him after that. So you got to give it that way. But he's an interesting player because, I'm not a fan of his until I saw some of the interviews with Matthews, and I like Matthews. We've all been following him for years. And I sometimes wonder if Matthew Tkachuk has taken on that personality that you talked about, old Prof, because of the dynamic in Calgary. If he was around some different teammates like the Austin Matthews of the world and things like that, if he would be a different type of player. Forbes, what do you think on that front? Is Tkachuk just the new Brad Marchand, or how does this player? Is he an enigma that way? You pick it up from there.
Well, I was going to mention too, like that is going to be a storyline going in, and I think it takes away a lot from the Calgary Flames to the story being Tkachuk versus Muzzin. It's not the Leafs versus Calgary. But I had a chance to watch Matthew Tkachuk in London, and I really think that his game has changed a little bit at the NHL level. He's almost forced to stand up for himself a little bit more, whereas in London he was such a team guy, and a lot of the nights were big Tkachuk fans, and having him around, having Big Walt around, really changed the dynamic of the team. Whereas now in Calgary, he's almost fighting for that support from his teammates. And you're gonna see a change over his career as well. Yeah, right now he's more of a Marchand type player where he's there to agitate. I do think his teammates enjoy having him around. I think there's a lot of maturity that needs to come to his game as well. And that's where in the next couple of years, you're going to see that change. You're going to see the leadership come out in him. You're going to see, him maybe taking less stupid penalties and more, standing up for his teammates and not just making it the Matthew Tkachuk show. But right now, I do think that, he's an immature player. He's a young guy. He wants to go out there and make a name for himself. Obviously, we don't like to compare players to their maybe fathers that played in the league, but he is playing in Big Walt's shadow, and he wants to make a name for himself, and that's what he's done so far. Is it a name that people respect? Probably not, but at the same time, I do think we will see a different player, if we talk about it in 2-3 years than what we're seeing right now.
The biggest thing about Marchand, and wouldn't it be great if he was a Leaf, because then you could say he's a great player, right? But being that Toronto's always had to go up against him for all these years, no one that wears a Leaf jersey would likes Marchand. But remember after he played for Team Canada under Mike Babcock, and the following year he was a leading scorer in the league? Like, he just changed his game. Suddenly wasn't a third, fourth line, gritty, stupid penalty type guy. He was a top line player that was a real scoring threat all of a sudden. Still could do those things like lick in the face and all those ridiculous things, but he suddenly, his skill came to the forefront. Peter, is that kind of where Tkachuk could get in his trajectory in the league?
Skill-wise, I think he's already there. I think he does provide great offense, and we've seen that with his net front presence, his quick hands in tight. He could be that, guy in front to disrupt and cause trouble for the opposition. And when he does that, again, he's a really great player. There's nothing about that. But again, his antics and everything like that, trying to pick fights with, Drew Doughty, Zach Kassian, where, he's going butt end first and then he hits him and Kassian is unsuspecting of it. And Kassian's, just had enough of, what he's doing. It really is difficult because he's the kind of player, again, I said this before, he's the kind of player you want on your team. But when you have those kind of plays or issues, it is damaging to the team. And I think that there was rumors are circling that, maybe he didn't appreciate that no one came to his defense when Muzzin shot the puck at him. And, that was the reason why maybe they had a players only meeting, try and hash things out. But you know what? It is what it is, I think. I think you're going to get with Matthew Tkachuk. Yeah, he could still probably grow out of it. But at the moment right now, he's going to continue doing his thing. And you're going to see the same thing with Brady Tkachuk, because we've seen him kind of like do the same thing where, when he's in front of the net and he's on his game, great. But when he's getting agitated and when things aren't going his way, he's going to put up the stupid stuff right now. And it's something you don't want to talk about, but it really is. And it's really concerning, especially if you're the Calgary Flames right now.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew's point is a good one. And I want to say thank you for that, because honestly, I think you're right that things will change over the course of his career. And I appreciate you pointing that out, that your knowledge of him from London, because, these kids come in and I mean, they're just kids and they're learning not just how to play, but how to play with a team and how to play with, it must be a very difficult situation for them, knowing which way to go. And I think, I hope you're right that it's just it's just part of growing into the role. And to go back to something that I think Kevin said now I'm being old, the old part of old Prof. But I'm just trying to think about. Oh well, I'll stop there. It'll come back to me.
We're here. We got a long show.
Oh yeah.
Now going back, Peter, to what you said with the Muzzin puck flip into Tkachuk. I did see an interview with Johnny Gaudreau a couple of days after that, and it was interesting because when you look at it, it was over in the corner. The Flames bench, it was pretty much invisible to the Flames bench.
Yeah.
The horn had blown, and they were all walking off. The players, you saw that Tkachuk was the deepest into the play. Horn blew. The other 6 players on the ice, because they had pulled the goalie, they had all turned and started skating the other way. All the players on the bench, they just started going in. So I could see how Tkachuk felt pretty alone in that moment. But I can also see what the teammates are saying. The horn blew, we left. Like, we didn't know that happened. And so it was an interesting dynamic. It's been a different kind of season in Calgary for sure. And it's always fun to watch these two teams play. It's been just a fun season to watch altogether. But now,
Kevin, quick note. I just wanted to, we have been referencing a lot how Tischuck is a very Marchand type player. And look, we'll all admit as players or as people watching Toronto, we love to hate Marchand. His skill level has reached that next level. The difference being, Marchand will admit that when the stuff that he's doing is antics. He knows through and through that when he licks somebody's face or goes to kiss another player, which obviously we won't see any of that in the near future, but he'll come out afterwards and say, yeah, you know what, I 100% it's antics. The difference with Tischuck right now, and this is the maturity level I'm talking about, is that after the game, he's looking for sympathy. He's looking for, well, Muzzin flicked the puck at me. Where were my teammates to come help me in that situation, rather than saying, you know what, this is a 1v1 right now. And I created some chaos on the ice, and Muzzin came back at me the following game. He's looking for that attention, whereas Marchand, you know what? Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he gets under the skin of other players, but he's also part of the top line in all of hockey right now. And for him to be a part of that and still be able to create that kind of atmosphere on the ice, that's the difference right now between Marchand and Tischuck. And I think, or I hope that, 2-3 years time, we will see that change in Tischuck where, he does have that ability and that skill level, but also be able to come off and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm causing a disturbance on the ice. And that's what gets me into the game. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, we'll be watching that one. Now let's switch to another player of interest back on the blue and white. If you were watching the broadcast on TSN for the Winnipeg-Toronto series, you saw that the Quizmaster asked if Zach Hyman should be on the Canadian Olympic team. Now, I'm right in this season, so I wasn't even thinking of the Olympic team going forward. And I thought, yeah, I see Zach Hyman on this team. We can go back in the 3-star selection this week. Zach Hyman was the number 1 star for March in my books. The guy is such a good player on any line he plays on. He makes everybody around him better. It's amazing to watch. New father, he's got little baby Theo at home, is 2-month-old, and obviously fatherhood's sitting well with Zach Hyman. The only scary thing is, how expensive is this guy going to be to sign and keep a Maple Leaf? But what do you guys think of Hyman? Let's start with the Quizmaster. Do you guys think that Zach Hyman is right now part of the Canadian Olympic discussion? We will start with Peter.
Listen, I love Zach Hyman as much as the next Leaf fan or media personnel. Like, I think he's terrific at what he does. And you just mentioned it right there, Kevin. He makes every single line great. And even when he was away with Tavares and Matthews, he was driving that third line with Engvall and Mikheyev. But for the Olympics, it's interesting because there's so much depth and there's so many great talent on Team Canada, especially on the wing position. I mean, we have centers going over to the wing position as well. So it's interesting to see how that is going to play out. I know that there is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%, 100% making the team. I have him maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40, more leaning towards the 40 because of that depth issue. If anything, I think he would be a great addition to a World Hockey Championship roster, where if the team misses out on the playoffs in the near future, Zach Hyman could definitely be a force throughout the lineup on the power play, penalty kill, and be that kind of player. At the moment right now, the Olympics is just way too tough, especially if it's going to be best on best and centers are going to wing and players are changing positions. He is in a tough spot, I think.
It is. It's one of those things where he's in the wrong country sometimes, right? And that's why Willie Nylander has an advantage with having that dual passport and playing on a different country team and still going to the Olympics, because he would have a hard time making Team Canada as well. But Zach Hyman, old Prof, what do you think? Do you see Zach Hyman wearing a Team Canada jersey in 2022?
I do not. And I think not because he's not great. And you may have heard me talk about Zach Hyman before. I think he's an amazing player and should be a keystone in the team going forward into the future. But I can't see him making the Olympics. It's a different kind of game. And I think with not that he can't play it, but I think they'll just go for other players.
Now, I know Forbes probably has every stat in his head right now on pros and cons and why it should be, why it shouldn't be. And the different percentages that Peter alluded to with the quiz master was the percentage of making it on. The O-Dog, he's playing to the Toronto fans and everything else, but he did say 100%. He's saying 100%. Jeff O'Neill says that Zach Hyman will be on the Olympic team. I think Drieger was around 60%. So Forbesy, give us your statistical breakdown and can Hyman make this team?
So I'm going to go a little bit off the board from you guys, play a little devil's advocate here. 2006, Shane Doan made Team Canada. Shane Doan's top point season, 78 points. Now, Hyman's not close to that. He's on pace this year for an 82-game season. He'll have 56 points, which will be a career high for him. But 56 points and 78 points, I mean, there is a major difference there. That said, you are playing on a bigger ice surface. Hyman has underlying speed that is not talked about nearly enough. He's a role player that, as we've alluded to, makes every line that he plays on 10 times better than what they should be. Engvall and Mikheyev, they had their opportunities before he was on that line, but when he went to that line, who was the top scoring line for the Maple Leafs during that tenure? Yeah. It was the third line. Will Hyman make the team? I don't think so. I'm going to put it at a 55%, so there's a slight chance. But when you're talking about these countries, you want those role players on your team. You don't want, 27 guys who are all top 3 picks in the NHL who have maybe bigger egos than, that team mentality. You're talking about a guy who right now, and this will lead into our next discussion here, Kevin, is that he would take a hometown discount to stay in Toronto. On top of all of that, he's got books that he wrote that he could read to these guys over at the Olympic Games. But no, I in all honesty, he's not going to make this team. That said, I mean, there has to be some consideration when you're talking about, and I'll go back to Shane Doan in 2006, where realistically, he was not a guy that you would normally put on the team, but he played a role. He played that fourth line kind of, bump and grind, big ice surface, can get around, can add something to that team that, maybe is not an offensive threat, but more of a, hey, we're going to get some penalties in this tournament. We're going to need somebody that go out there who has the ability to be a penalty killer and has the ability to score shorthanded. Look at the numbers. Look at the history of what Hyman's been able to do in his short career so far. This is a guy that should be talked about when we're talking about the Canadian Olympic team.
All right, so let's talk about the Maple Leaf team then. The other team that wears that Maple Leaf on their chest. How is Toronto going to afford this guy? Because really, the numbers are going up all the time. I know what you're saying is, and thank you for that statistical breakdown with 58 points. But we know that he's there for more than just the points. He's just such a line mate. It's pretty amazing to watch. But I think he's 2.85 right now, something along those lines. Obviously due for a raise. And Toronto, we know the situation there with the cap and the things that they're going to have to fill, including a new goaltender or a re-signing of a goaltender. We'll talk about that a little later, but they're in a cap crunch. They don't have money to throw around. And now you've got another great forward that is kind of overpricing himself for the Leafs roster. So Forbesy, let's go back to you then on that. How much do you see this guy getting? Does he get a hometown discount? How does Toronto keep him around?
So right now his cap is at, I believe, 2.25. His actual salary is 2.5, but I did mention a hometown discount, and I do think that Hyman's a guy that, looks at his cards and says, I'm playing right now with Matthews, Marner, Nylander's there, Tavares is there long term. This core is going to do something at some point if I can sign here. I think he's a guy that maybe you see make a jump of, $1.5 million, go up to maybe 4.2. But it's gonna cost the Leafs, and right now they've got the cap wizard there, just working numbers and finding ways to fit these guys in. And I think they'll find a way to fit him in at 4.25, something around that mark. But I think they're gonna have to throw in a no movement clause, and that might be what solidifies getting Hyman back, is knowing that he's got a future in Toronto, that he's not going to be a piece that they talk about every trade deadline. And maybe a longer term, and maybe you're looking at 5-6 years at $4.5 million, and it will cost them. But once this COVID cap, whatever you want to call it, kind of settles down, I think you will see the cap rise again, and it could end up being a team friendly deal. But yeah, right off the hop, you're going to be fighting to fit him in at probably 4.2, 4.5.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side of that too, or to add another angle on the story, is Seattle's coming in, and Seattle they can't sign him before. They're going to have to let him go to a free agent, because if they signed him before, then it's another player that they've got to protect. So he's going to be out there. And when I'm looking at him, even if Seattle figured out a way, like that Seattle team is going to be fun to watch, because they've got so many options to pick from due to this cap situation that everybody is under. But he would be wearing a letter in Seattle, probably. We know he wears a letter on the retro day for the Leafs, which is only 6 games of the year. He's clearly a leader. And now I know what you're saying with he gets to play with some great players, but at the same time, it overshadows how good he is. You talked about his speed and everything else that doesn't get played at all. He's a letter on his chest, a top line player, the guy on the posters in a new franchise, that type of deal, that's going to be out there and kind of thrown in front of his agent in a few months. So Peter, what do you think? Would that be enough to draw Hyman out of Toronto? Maybe some more cash, a letter, franchise type of player that another club could go after?
Oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good question. I said I'm not in Zach Hyman's mind right now. I think only Zach Hyman can make the choice that he's going to make for the future, for himself and for his family. But I mean, if he's dead set on staying with Toronto, taking that discount to just be here and be a factor and win games, all the more power to him. It's ultimately his choice no matter what. And I'm pretty sure the Maple Leafs want to try and do everything to try and keep him, because he is an essential aspect or essential key piece to this team going forward. I mean, we basically showed our love for him early on, power play, penalty kill, speed, everything. So if they're trying to protect him, or if he's on the Seattle Kraken's radar, maybe you could try and swing a deal with them, have them make a deal and try and have them take someone maybe like Alexander Kerfoot, maybe not protect Justin Hall or Travis Dermott possibly, because they got some good defenders coming up in the pipeline that can make immediate impact on the blue line. And not only that, Kerfoot's contract at $3.5 million would be enough to try and help and add more to Zach Hyman's contract as well. So couple of factors right now. I mean, let's face it, if I was on the team right now, that Seattle deal does sound, very interesting to, go over there and be a star player on a rebuilding franchise. I mean, look what happened with the Vegas Knights. They're one of the top teams right now. And also, I think a lot of teams may be a little bit hesitant right now because they have experience with the Vegas expansion draft. Maybe they're going to think things a little more through and maybe feel like, hey, you know what? We know Zach Hyman is going to be a threat when we play them. We're going to keep him no matter what.
Yeah. Zach, every one of his interviews too, what I like about him is, and we watch them and I can understand the grind that they're going through. So not everybody is always smiling every time they sit in front of that Zoom call and take on the same questions over and over. But the thing about Zach is he's always smiling in those interviews. He's happy to be in Toronto. He's happy to be doing what he's doing. Like I said, old Prof, he's obviously loving fatherhood. So you talk a lot about the meshing of the community and everything like that. Is that going to be enough in your mind that Hyman would be staying in Toronto and maybe as Forbes mentioned, getting the hometown discount and getting a long-term deal?
Andrew said, I think, a key thing when he talked quickly about Hyman being an author. If you read his books, you get a sense of the deep philosophy. And I looked at the books and I read them and I looked at how he got to write them, listening to his grandfather talk sort of on his knee. There's a deep sort of sense of purpose in those books. And I think that deep sort of sense of purpose puts Hyman at a very different level. And I think that means that he'll want to stay in Toronto. He has his head screwed on really straight. And, he's such a good guy. And I teased a little bit last week or so about the people I'd want as my neighbors on the Maple Leafs. He's certainly one of them. He's such a good guy, such a thoughtful guy, such a keen guy, such a happy guy, as you say. I think, when Dubas and Keefe look at the makeup of this team and look at what's making it successful, I think one huge fact, and I said this before, is just the internal chemistry and get alongness of the people on the team. And that's so huge. And I think they know that Hyman adds to that. I like the idea of a no trade clause for the next 6 years. I can see it. COVID really impacts that. I have no idea what the underlying numbers of the NHL are, but I really see now, I don't think Andersen will be back. And I think that's the money that they'll spend on Hyman to keep him. And I can't know that. I mean, I'm just speculating, but that seems to me where the money will come from for Hyman to be signed in the future.
Right.
Kevin, it also rains a lot in Seattle, and I'm not sure a lot of people like to sit out in the rain.
Well, baby Theo maybe will factor into that as well. Doesn't want to be walking in the stroller out in the rain as well. I've loved all the pictures of baby Theo that Hyman and his lovely wife have shared. Awesome family. And when you see Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe in their family role, that Hyman is their kind of guy. You're absolutely right, guys. This is a guy that they're going to want to keep, and if they're going to have to figure out a way, because he's definitely a Dubas guy. Keefe loves his play. Huge. Imagine that you've got the core four superstar players, and Zach Hyman is the guy that we're all gushing about right now.
Well, we call them core four because of the money they make, not necessarily because of their value on the team. But if there's a core, he's part of it, and I think should start calling him part of it, because I can't see the team as successful without him being center in it.
Okay. And just going back to when, they made the acquisition from him, and I know Andrew Forbes did a really good piece about looking back at that Hyman deal.
I love that article. I had totally forgotten about it. And when that came up, I was like, oh, man, what a great article. Thanks for that.
Absolutely amazing. But even when in his first game as a Leaf, you saw it right then and there, the energy that he brought nonstop. And that first game where he was on that line with Matthews and Nylander in that 4-goal game that he had, that historic night, he may not have been like a major factor on the score sheet, but man, he was going into the corners, and you saw what they loved, or why, a reason why they got him, because a team is going to be essential going down, especially in a deep playoff hunt that the Leafs are in probably right now. A Zach Hyman type of player is going to help you go farther.
All right. Okay. So let's switch gears. This one's going to be the tough one to talk about because as we've all said, Frederik Andersen, anytime that anyone talks about Frederik Andersen, people get a kind of defensive, emotional right away. And it's because he brought so much to this team when they didn't have anything to offer, really. He was the first piece of this whole rebuild. And that's why I think people feel a personal attachment to him. But old Prof, you alluded to, he's probably not coming back. We don't know the extent of the injury situation right now and what's going on. Keith said that his last appointment was showing positive signs. We still don't know what any of that means if he's coming back. Now, Peter, you had an article that just ripped across Leaf Nation in the last couple of days with Darcy Kemper that we had talked about last week. And I think that goes to show that the nation is kind of behind the fact that it's time to move on from Andersen, and it's time to start looking towards not only how to fix or how to get through the next 20 games plus the playoffs, but it's time to start looking towards the future. And you also saw that Elliot Friedman reported this week that they've made a call to Buffalo to see what the plans are with Allmark as well. So there's some looks towards the future on this one. So Peter, let's start with some of the reactions and what you heard from the nation when it came to if Kemper can come to town.
Do I start off with the good or the bad? First off, shout out to the old Prof for talking about, Quick and I follow last week, and serving as inspiration for that article as another possibility or direction that the Maple Leafs could go down. But yeah, a lot of people, and I assume some of them were kind of Arizona Coyotes fans, were hesitant to let Kemper go. Granted that, he is injured. He is putting up better numbers than Andersen. I understand that you don't want to try and let him go, but his cap hit is at 4.5. And I believe there's something underlying there where they may have to pay him a little bit more, sort of like, an incentive that doesn't count against the cap. So the Maple Leafs do have a lot of money outside where they can help alleviate kind of that cap pressure from the Arizona Coyotes. And just looking at the numbers overall, it's just more steady than Andersen. Obviously, the last few years were pretty good. This year's a little bit lower, considering that, Arizona was struggled a little bit out of the gate, and then he had an injury himself. But I think a couple factors come in why this would work out. Again, a lot of the uncertainty, especially with the injury to Andersen and even Jack Campbell's health. We don't know what's going to happen in the near future. We got a bit of a scare last game against the Winnipeg Jets where a puck seemed to go off his foot. He limped off and everyone was, freaking out. I mean, rightfully so. But at the same time, if you're able to bring in someone like Darcy Kemper, who is still considered week to week, 7-day quarantine if he comes to Canada, that quarantine will coincide with his rehab. And that was one of the main factors why I wrote that article, because it's something that Dubas would want to try and, take advantage of at that point. And just going back to the original point about the comments, man, they do not want to give him up. And I think a lot of them are quite angry with that article. But at the same time, I mean, it makes sense for the Maple Leafs, maybe not so much for the Coyotes where, Andersen is going to be a free agent, but we'll see what happens. I mean, there are other names out there. You mentioned Linus Ullmark, who has pretty good numbers, even on a really bad Buffalo Sabres team this year. Chris Drieger, who could possibly be on the move right now, could get some attention now that Spencer Knight signed his entry-level contract. So there's another name possibly coming into play. The goaltending situation is something that I don't know if Dubas is actually going to make a move on, but it is something to really consider about.
Yeah, and now the old Prof, you were talking earlier that Arizona, you could actually see this trade happening because of the situation that Arizona's in and what they've got to do with their bankroll there.
Yeah, I can see Arizona getting rid of big salaried players because of the situation. They've always had a difficult situation paying their bills, and I think that they'd take prospects. I think if Dubas made that trade, it might be for the long term rather than the short term, in the sense that he might give up a high end prospect to the Coyotes for some return. I can't know that. We haven't mentioned. I mean, just to throw out a wild one, David Rittich. I think he's not the as strong in Calgary as he was. I think he's a good goalie. He might be there, but I think so much depends on the health of going into the trade deadline. So much depends on the health of Andersen. If they're fine there, because last night there was in an interview with James Duffy, I think Dubas said that there were two things that he was looking for. One was the performance before the trade deadline, and the other was the health. And the only thing I could think of on the performance was Tkachuk's play on the second line. And the other thing I could think of on the health was Andersen's status with the injury going forward over the next 9 days. So I think that's a key one. I can see that. I can see the trade being made. I can see Arizona wanting to make those trades to level off their salary cap. So I don't know what's going to happen, as always with Dubas, but at the same time, it's possible that that's a thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, something else happened in the North Division this week too, with Vancouver paying up for Demko. They've now got more than $12 million on the books in goalies in Vancouver when you add in Luongo's existing hit. So I know that they're hoping at this point that Seattle is going to be taking not Demko obviously, but Holtby would be going. But Vancouver is kind of falling a little bit quicker than expected. We see every time our Hockey Writers team writes about Benning that article is on fire because everyone's got something to say about that guy right now. And I would say the mismanagement that he's done of that roster. But all I'm saying, Forbesy, is that there are so many goaltender situations on every team right now. How does Toronto take advantage of that?
Oh, I think it's just that you got to find a way. I mean, essentially, they have to find a way in their cap situation to take advantage of another team that's struggling with their cap situation. So whether you take a goaltender with a little bit more of a higher cap and you move Kerfoot along with Andersen, find a package deal that benefits you in goaltending, but also rids you of a little bit of your cap space. I think that's the only way that we're going to see a big move. One guy, had we talked, had I, had something to say about it a couple of weeks back and the Preds were still sellers, I would have said Pecorine is a guy that could definitely be on the Leafs radar. UC Saros is obviously the guy that's going to be carrying them to the Askarov days. So, I mean, there is potential there as well. The thing is right now with goaltending, there's so much potential, and it's very much like running backs in the NFL where, they've got a certain amount of time where they're going to be dominant as goaltenders. And obviously you have the elite ones who are around for an extended period of time, but there's 3 or 4 years where you've got a window with a goaltender and then you're kind of on to the next thing. So, I mean, with that said, I don't think there's any question that Andersen's gone at the end of the year. I brought up the question of whether Jack Campbell is a potential starter. I mean, you're talking about a 29-year-old, couple of years younger than Andersen, has 11th overall pick potential that Dallas saw back in 2010. So right now we're seeing a Jack Campbell that is more athletic than Frederik Andersen, more positionally sound than Frederik Andersen. Is he a guy that could step up and take a starting role with the Toronto Maple Leafs? I mean, it seems like the team does enjoy having him around. It seems that, he's a guy that loves playing for the Leafs. Just the way that he's able to credit the team that plays in front of him on a night-to-night basis. But I mean, there's so many questions right now surrounding the Leafs goaltending. And obviously we saw them make the move with the Columbus Blue Jackets to bring in that young prospect as well. And, he's only got one game of NHL experience under his belt. So there's another guy that I know when Peter and I had Mark Shagg on the podcast, he talked very highly of Columbus's, goaltending prospects. So, when I saw his name come about, I was thinking maybe there's the Toronto goalie of the future. So there's a lot of questions right now. I don't think any of us really have the true answer to what Toronto's going to do and what Dubas is going to do, but there is something happening. And I think the health of Andersen is going to play a huge part. There's rumors of whether it's a hip flexor or a groin or what have you, and the potential of him recovering quickly. And I think right now Campbell's the hot hand. Campbell's the guy they're going to ride. And unless they see a deal that benefits them, I don't think they make a move. I think they stick with Campbell.
Yeah. And we just all hope that knee stays healthy. Put it in bubble wrap, put him in the ice bath after every game and keep him in there until you roll him out for the next game at this point. So we want to make sure that you guys stay up to date with all of the Hockey Writers' amazing content that goes out every week, including that Darcy Kemper piece, including the Zach Hyman piece, and including the Old Prof's news and rumors that goes out every day. So make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow us, like us on your social media, and always head over to thehockeywriters.com. And we're going to start wrapping up the show now with some of the comments that we saw over the week, or things that we saw on the internet that made us think. And I had a difficult task this week of writing the 3 stars for March, because it was a different kind of month where the losing streak and the different goalies and Andersen going down, Campbell playing great, but only playing in 4 games during the month of March. So it was difficult. So long story short, I gave some honorable mentions, one of which was to Matthews, just because it's Matthews. And then the top 3 stars were Campbell in the 3rd star, Marner in the 2nd, and Hyman in the 1st. Somebody was upset that I gave Marner a 2nd star and only gave Austin a honorable mention. Comparing the two was ludicrous and all these different things. Luckily, I had some people that defended it, because I wasn't comparing those two at all. It's hard to pick, you guys. Come on, give me a break here. But I thought it was interesting that there is people that think that Marner is being blown up because he plays with Matthews, and the only reason that he's good, as this guy points out, if you put Marner on Kerfoot's line, Marner wouldn't be nearly as good or putting up the numbers. Of course, Matthews makes the players around him better, but I also think Marner makes the players around him better. And all you need to do is look at how good Tavares' numbers were last season when he played pretty regularly with Marner. When Tavares had that big slump, what did Keefe do with about 10 minutes left in the game? He threw Marner on Tavares' line, and suddenly Tavares has a goal. So don't get mad when your favorite player doesn't get into the top 3. I still give them mentions. I wish I could put all 22 in there, but I've got to try to boil it down to an article. So that's my comment for the week. Peter, you got blasted with comments, good and bad, all over the place. Tell us what were some of your favorites.
I'm not. I wasn't going to name drop anyways, but I can't remember the name no matter what. But a lot of the comments in my Kemper Garland article, a lot of the fans wanted Austin Matthews to return back for Kemper and Garland. They said that if Toronto's asking for Kemper and Garland, we want Austin Matthews. And even on Twitter, someone mentioned Mitch Marner. I'm like you, Kevin. I'm scratching my head right now, or not now, but then I'm like, that's not going to happen. I mean, giving up two premier players in Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner for, a decent starting goaltender, good numbers, but he's not top 10 in the league, maybe just outside of that. And Connor Garland only has 139-point season, I believe he's got 28, 29 points this year. Very good, could match his number from last year, but he is not an elite level player. You're only trading Matthews if it's only for possibly Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel at this moment. So seeing some of those comments are just, I mean, yeah, whatever. It's their opinion. But it's not going to happen.
No, and that's all the power to them. That's the hometown. They want the hometown boy back. But if Matthews was traded out of town, then anyone that signed off on that might as well leave town too, because their house is going to be TP'd for the rest of the time that they live in the Toronto area. I did see a comment on yours that said, "No way, we want Gary Price from Montreal." And I thought, well, maybe they could get Gary, but they're not getting Carey. So. Forbes, what would you see on the interweb this week that had you laughing, second guessing? What would you see?
You know what? I'm laughing because I love comments. I absolutely love comments. And when I first started the Hockey Writers, I used to comment back with a little bit more irritation, and now I just chuckle. But on my Jack Campbell piece that I just released yesterday, I got a comment about how Andersen's clutch level is 0.00003, and so I was looking all over the internet for what clutch level is, but I wrote back and just said this must be a new advanced statistic that I'm not aware of. Because I mean it's at the end of the day it comes down to the team, and it's a unit. So when Andersen fails, the Maple Leafs fail, and that's the way it is. But that one got me. And then I had another one that said that Andersen lost the room, and that's why they play better in front of Jack Campbell. And I like to consider us the outsider insiders. But whoever commented that, it must be nice to know everything that's going on in the Leafs dressing room, because I don't know how you know that, and unless you're friends with Andersen and he told you that he's not feeling the vibes in the room anymore, I don't know. But my guess is Andersen didn't lose the room. He was out hanging out with Matthews last summer in Arizona. So keep commenting. I love them.
Yeah, we do love the comments. So make
Absolutely.
sure you're commenting on all the social media, and because we do like it, and it does get us thinking of different stories. And like I said, maybe I've got to look at how people see Marner. Maybe no, I can't change Marner. Marner's awesome. I'm leaving it at that. Old Prof, I know that you always love the comments on your articles. You mentioned that the people that comment on your articles, you consider them family. So how did you get the positive vibes this week from what you put out there?
Well, I do. I just so appreciate that. I mean, there's a group of people, Herb and Stan and Bossman, who comment regularly on my articles, and I'm in a different situation, I think, than you folks, because until 2.5 years ago, I never wrote about hockey. I wrote other things, very academic things, and so I do my homework. I do my research in very much the same way that I did when I was writing a history of the 20th century. But at the same time, and really that's serious, that's true. Right. I do every bit as much research now as I did then, but I always make mistakes. I do not remember when Andersen first came to the team. I do not remember that. And the guys really,
Forbes covers all this stuff. Just call him up.
I know I should, but I don't remember. And what I do is I trot out stuff that's just wrong. And these guys are so gentle with me. They tell me what's right. And honestly, I'm constantly commenting, I so appreciate your addition to the conversation, And I really do, because I'm learning from these players or people who are long-term Maple Leafs fan, and boy, are they ever long-term Maple Leafs fan. But I just want to, so thank you for that, all of you who comment to my stuff. I learned from you, and I appreciate that. The one thing that did come up and makes me really think is that, and Andrew, I think, talked about the problems with the Maple Leafs power play. So I'm watching Tyson or Barry, who we mentioned last week. He's just firing it on the goal. We have a neat power play in that once I think Wayne Simmons started to plump himself right in the middle of the goalie, now suddenly a lot of people are doing it. But this comment was from, I think, Stan, who said, what we don't have is somebody firing the puck on net. Muzzin's the best one we have, but we don't have Barry anymore. The last person we ever had was Jake Gardiner, who really fired the puck on the net and then waited for the rebounds. I saw that Gardiner was put on waivers. I'm wondering could it be that Gardiner might be coming back to the Maple Leafs? I'm just teasing about that. But, these comments really make me think about the possibilities of the stuff. So, I'm constantly, as I say, learning from the people who make the comments on the stuff, and they really do remind me of things and send me on bunny trails that I just really enjoy going down, because I'm starting to learn more about the Maple Leafs, and I truly am. Don't anyone in Edmonton listen to this, becoming a Maple Leafs fan. So God bless them.
And shout out to Herb. There are a few that, but I really like Herb's comments. He's harsh when he needs to be harsh. He's critical when he needs to be critical, and he's your biggest fan when you need it as well. So I really do enjoy Herb's comments.
Yeah, me
and
too.
A lot of the other ones that you mentioned too, they're great. But Forbes, I think you've been sent on a mission now. You are the stats guy, and now you're in to create the new stat rating for advanced stats on Clutch.
There you go. I'll work on that.
We'll be looking forward to it, and we'll be looking forward to the next episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Thanks so much for joining us every week. Thanks so much for subscribing. Our numbers just keep going up. We hope you like what you're seeing. Comment, find us on your favorite social media platform. Let us know what you think of this great team during what's going to be a memorable year, and we will see you next week on the Maple Leafs Lounge.